Hello, botany students, and welcome back to another lecture video courtesy of Mr. Miller. All right, today we are going to be learning about leaves. So before we begin, I want you to go ahead and think about why trees have leaves in the first place. What is their purpose, and why might they lose them during the winter? So I kind of alluded to that in my first trees lecture that I did earlier in the week. So think about that for a second. Feel free to pause at home and write this down in a notebook, okay? All right, let's come back. So trees have leaves because they need leaves in order to photosynthesize, in order to convert light energy into chemical energy. So leaves are photosynthetic structures, allowing them to harness the sun's energy and make their own energy. And why might they lose them during winter? Essentially, it's to conserve energy or water. So one of the two. This is why deciduous trees with those broad leaves will lose their leaves in order to conserve water and energy, because those leaves would not be frost tolerant, essentially, or winter proof like needles would be, because needles have a waxy coating in coniferous trees and they wouldn't lose as much water. All right, so today we're going to take some notes on leaf structure. So last time we talked about different types of trees, and now, given that autumn is among us and it's all around us, and we can see those beautiful colors changing, we want to talk about leaf structure so that we have a better context of information when we go out and look at leaves outside, which I'm sure many of you have done already in this beautiful autumn. So we want to inform ourselves more about leaves. So first, let's talk about leaf basics. The actual structure of the leaf is a photosynthetic structure used to capture light energy and produce chemical energy in the form of sugars like starches and glucose. All right. Leaves have vascular tissue that are called veins, and that allows them to transport water from the roots to the leaves, and it allows them to transport sugar from the leaves down to the roots, where they're stored in many vegetative structures like tubers, for example. Tubers are a great nutrient storage structure. Let's move me over here. The middle vein of the leaf is going to be called the midrib. The midrib is going to be essentially kind of the central artery that allows nutrients, that allows those vascular fluids, so xylem, movement of water, phloem, movement of sugars through those veins. Think of them like highways that move water and nutrients. So the midrib is the one that goes right down the middle. The edge of the leaf is called the margin. So think about the margin of your page in like a Google Doc or a Word document as being the edge of that page, whereas the margin of a leaf is the edge of that leaf. And then kind of the pointed end of the margin would be the tip of that leaf. All right, so you could also call this entire structure the blade of the leaf. It kind of looks like a dagger end. So the margin is the edge. There are veins throughout. We're not going to talk too much about the lamina per se, but we are going to talk about the petiole, which is the stem structure that connects the leaf to the branch. So the branch will have stem structures that connect itself, the vascular tissue within the trunk of the tree, for example, or the stem of a smaller herbaceous plant, to the leaves. So this stem structure that connects from the branch to the leaf is called the petiole. Petiole. All right, so that's some brief info on leaf structure. I'm not going to go too deep into like the really specific structures, but now I want to talk about leaf types. And the purpose of this is not so that you know all of these different types. And the purpose is also not so that you can identify, okay, oak leaves are these, maple leaves are these, and memorize each of the individual species. Essentially, you would need to be given some information or a identification guide to do that. And for your leaf collection, you can just go ahead and take pictures and use PlantNet, the app, to do that. So the purpose isn't for a large amount of memorization. The purpose is to categorize leaves into a couple of different groups. The first group being a simple leaf. So many different leaves like this red oak or like a maple, for example, or an elm or a birch would fall into the category of simple leaves. They are very simple to describe, and essentially they only have one single leaf blade. So it's a single leaf that is never divided into smaller units called leaflets. So leaflets are going to be smaller, kind of subdivided pieces of leaves all attached to that same petiole, essentially. They are always attached to a branch by a stem called the petiole, as we said before. So the petiole would be right here. The branch, the stem from the branch radiates out, and that branch is called the petiole. The edges or the margins of these leaves can be a variety of different shapes and sizes. So they can be found as being smooth edged. They can be jagged or serrated edged, similar to kind of like what an elm or a American beech would be. They'd be serrated. Or they can be parted. They can be parted on the ends as well. So you would say this leaf is kind of lobed because it has these interlobes that kind of come around like this. So here's a lobe, a projection outwards. Here's a sinus, which would be kind of a cavity. So for example, a simple leaf would be the red oak leaf shown on the right. All right. And I just want to note, as you're going through these notes, don't forget to be filling out the companion note guide that goes along with it. It'll be a lot easier if you just go ahead and use this. You can print it off, virtual folks or absent folks, and go ahead and fill it out at home. I also do have a short little identification activity at the end that will be a good activity for you. So be sure to fill that out as we go along. Let's jump back in. So now let's talk about a compound leaf. So a compound leaf also just has a single petiole, similar to our simple leaf. However, the compound leaf is going to have multiple leaflets on the same leaf unit, you would say. And there's a couple different terms that we use to define those. So a leaf who is subdivided into leaflets is a compound leaf. And it turns out that these subdivided leaflets are attached to a central stem or a substem called the rachis or the rachis. I believe it's pronounced rachis. So essentially, the petiole is the stem that goes from the branch to the leaflets. And then once you get to the first of the leaflets, that central axis, that central stem is called the rachis. All right, so it's called the rachis here. And any of the individual stems that radiate from the rachis are called not petioles, but petiolules. Petiolules. Kind of hard to say. Petiolules. All right, I have to say that a couple times. So essentially what a petiolule is a small petiole. A petiolule is a small petiole. It's like a sub-petiole. I realize there's quite a lot of vocab here, but I think this diagram kind of sums it up. Petiole radiates from the branch to the beginning of the leaflets. The rachis is the central axis between the leaflets, and then each of these smaller petioles or petiolules, I pronounced it better that time, is going to connect to the individual leaflets. Now here is another picture. The rachis would be this. This is a white ash. The petiolules would be these smaller junctions between the rachis and the leaflet, and then the petiole would be further down this way. So white ash leaf is an example of this, just essentially as a way that we can identify it. So once again, I wouldn't be so much expecting you to memorize, say, what kind of a leaf is this? Like this is a white ash, but I might be expecting you to identify this as a compound leaf. That would be completely reasonable based on what we've talked about. There are Going to be 3 types of compound leaves that we're going to talk about, and this will wrap up the notes after that. 3 types: pinnate, double pinnate, and palmate. Now, regarding these top 2, pinnation refers to the orientation of leaflets and how they arise from the rachis, essentially. And this will make more sense as we go forward. So essentially, the leaflets can be kind of alternate. They can be interspersed unevenly, not directly across from one another. They can be completely across from one another and symmetrical, or they can be asymmetrical. And it depends if they have a leaflet on the very end or not. And palmate is something completely different. So pinnate, just the single pinnate form, has 3 different subcategories. There's evenly pinnate, in which the leaves, the leaflets are symmetrical to each other. They're perfectly across from one another, and there's an even number: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So they're evenly pinnate. And these leaflets sprout pairs opposite of one another along that rachis. So the rachis is right here, remember? The petioles, the little petioles, would be here, connecting that rachis to the leaflet. But there, however, is no terminal end here, no leaflet on the end, as you would see here. With our oddly pinnate, contain leaflets that are also, opposite and symmetrical to one another. So they're directly opposite. However, there's an odd number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Not going to be an even number because you've got that 1 right on the tip. And we're going to see different plant species would maybe have evenly pinnate versus oddly pinnate. All right, so there is a terminal end here. And then alternately pinnate is essentially like odd, but then they are asymmetrical. So the leaflets sprout asymmetrically along the rachis. You can notice that they're not directly across from one another. They're staggered. They're staggered a bit. And there is a terminal leaflet here as well, okay? So that's pinnate. Then we get to double pinnate, where essentially double pinnate is just one more set of like divisions. So essentially in double pinnate, there's not only the rachis, which comes off of, so you've got the petiole down here, you got the rachis here, but then you have additional branching. So it gets a little bit confusing, and I realize if this is a little bit confusing. So you've got the branch here, the petiole, the rachis, but then from the rachis you get separate secondary stems that grow off of our main stem, which is the rachis. So essentially, each of these secondary stems contains petioles that attach to the leaflets. So this is pretty rare among North American plants. A rare occurrence in North America, typically seen in the honey locust leaf. Honey locust is a common deciduous tree around here. I see quite a lot of them around Sheboygan. They've got kind of a cracked brownish, orangish bark, not terribly orange, maybe a burnt orange color, and they have leaves that look similar to this. Now, when one falls down, you might just see kind of it was cut here. You wouldn't see this kind of double pinnate, but you'd definitely be able to see how it's a pinnately compound leaf. And lastly, palmate leaves. So as you've probably seen, leaf identification is pretty difficult. There's a lot to keep in mind. That's why I'm not going to so much quiz you on, what species of tree is this, but what type of leaf structure does it have? This would be palmate, a palmate leaf. So in a palmate leaf, the leaflets, we still have leaflets, remember, it's not just a simple leaf. They radiate out 360 degrees from a central axis, from a point of central attachment, from a common point of attachment. So they'd radiate out almost like the petals of a flower. So we have no rachis here, no rachis. So we've got a petiole, but there is no other, stem that all of them radiate from. It's just the petiole. and there's no secondary stem like we have in our double pinnate. And an example of this would be horse chestnut. Horse chestnut is an example of a palmate leaf. All right, now to wrap up this, I would like you to go ahead and in your notes, as I read these off, go ahead on that note sheet, try to ID the leaf type. So I've given you the species, but I want to know the leaf type. So is this going to be a simple leaf or a compound leaf? And if it's a compound, I want to know whether or not it's palmate, pinnate, or double pinnate, and what type of pinnate would it be? Would it be essentially an alternate, one that alternates, one that is odd and symmetrical, or one that is even and symmetrical? So go ahead, try these, American beech and walnut. You'll see that it corresponds to this table right here, and I'll clean this up and make it look a little bit nicer before you see it. So maybe I'd say American beech is simple, which I would be correct in saying that. So I'll just type that in there. This won't be turned in, but you might expect a quiz question on perhaps one of these. So you would absolutely want to write them down because it'll benefit you in the long run to do so. All right, so American beech, identify it. Black walnut, identify it. Green ash, identify it. Notice we've got a terminal leaflet here. And I said it's a leaflet, so that gives you a clue. It's either palmate or pinnate. Then we've got red buckeye here. This looks awfully similar to that horse chestnut. So think about that one. Sugar maple, think about this one. Definitely got some net-like veins here. We can tell by that it's a dicot. And then we've got honey locust here, which is that different one that we saw. That's a good example of one of those. So decide what that is. And then white willow, decide what that is. And decide what this unknown leaf would be. Unknown leaf. So perhaps we find this unknown leaf. We don't know what species it is. We could maybe take a picture and look it up on PlantNet. However, we're probably going to want to figure out what type of leaf it is as well. Okay, so do that. And here are the answers. So American beech is a simple leaf type. Black walnut, evenly pinnate. Notice if we count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's going to be 14 because we've got 2 on each side. They appear to be attached symmetrically, directly opposite, or at least it's not noticeably different. Green ash, now this is oddly pinnate right here. Now you might be able to make the argument this looks like it could alternate a little bit. So it's definitely odd, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if we count the number of leaflets. And we could probably say oddly pinnate. Although you might be able to say alternately if we knew for sure that these were staggered, but they look to be pretty much opposite from one another. Red buckeye. So if you're a fan of Ohio State, the buckeye plant, the buckeye Brutus guy is a representative of a buckeye nut. So this is the leaf of the buckeye plant. It is palmate. So it is arranged in a 360-degree fashion from that petiole. All right. And then sugar maple and honey locust. So think about sugar maple as being just one single leaf unit, no leaflets that diverge from the petiole. But then honey locust, we get all kinds of complex because we've got not only this rachis that essentially is like the backbone, the petiole at the bottom, the rachis between the leaflets. Then we've got some secondary stems too that are diverging from the rachis, from our rachis, and then we've got leaflets. So this is not only, pinnate, it's not only a single pinnate, but it has a secondary level of pinnation. So we'd call it a double pinnate. White willow, we're going to see is just a simple old leaf, nothing special about that. And this unknown leaf, so it's pretty hard to find examples of alterpinnate or alternate pinnate where it's not only an odd number of leaflets, but the leaflets actually alternate and are staggered along the stem. Not too easy to find that, but So that's essentially why we have an unknown leaf. We're not yet sure what species that would be, but we could perhaps look that up later. So the homework for Sunday at 11:59 p.m., and I'll show you where the classroom post is going to be to complete the leaf structured Google form that goes along with this one. So similar to that trees Google form, the tree notes Google form, go ahead and complete the leaf structure one. That'll take you all of 5 minutes. And then I'd like you to do one additional thing is read the article, Why Do Leaves Change Color? Because this is a pretty relevant topic to right now when we're in the middle of October and the leaves are in the midst of really changing color. So in order to, help you learn a little bit more about where that color comes from, what is exactly happening, I want you to go ahead and read this article. So I will take you to this article. It is Why Do Leaves Change Color? So it's really informative, and it'll walk you through some different leaf selections, kind of oak types, and if you wanted to look for these when you're out on a hike for your leaf collection, you could. Absolutely. So we could look at cottonwood or aspen. We can learn about why do leaves fall. And then what I want you to do with that article is complete the worksheet. There's a copy on Google Classroom. I'll show you that in a minute. And the only other thing is to start collecting leaves for your collection. So one short thing, one thing that'll be a little bit longer, and let me show you. I haven't yet posted this assignment, but once I do, for hybrids, you're going to just complete the Google form, read the article, and complete the worksheet. And then for virtuals, the only additional step will be to watch this lecture video, which you're watching. So essentially, then you'll complete this worksheet. And I realize this worksheet seems a little bit long, which it is. It has a total of 4 pages on it. So it's essentially kind of a activity guide that you can walk through. So using that website that I've provided you, define what photosynthesis is, define the pigments, fill in this chart about the different pigments, and then these can all be found in the different sections. So it'll tell you, click evergreen trees, and then you'll go and you'll find evergreen trees. So for example, we can go ahead and click evergreen trees, and that'll take us to where we want to then go and reroute to our correct. So just follow those instructions as you would. And then at the end, it'll ask you to identify trees. So this is a good activity that corresponds to what we've just done. Not so much with identifying species, but identifying leaf types, and why they change color is kind of another related topic. So let's see if we can find that right away. Let's see. So the prompt we were looking for is going to be tree key. Tree key. All right, so you'll go ahead and look for the tree key. And we will then, okay, so this is going to correspond to, I think it's going to correspond to these. Because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. Right. It's going to correspond to these trees right down here. So for example, let's see if we can just do one. I know, sorry, this is taking a little bit longer. Single flat needles with large upright cones. Let's see if it's under. Let me just double check if it's underneath the evergreen trees, perhaps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, here's the tree key. There we go. So it's under the section titled Evergreen Trees. Here's the dichotomous tree key. So then you can figure out, essentially, based on these different directions. So you pick the kind of tree you think you have, deciduous or coniferous, and then it kind of reroutes you to find one. So let's work through one together. Use the following clues to identify these trees using the tree key. So if it's single flat needles with large upright cones, so we want needles there, so we want coniferous. All right, coniferous trees have two types of leaves that are needle-shaped and leaves that are not needle-shaped. Okay, so I think they're going to be needle-shaped. Single flat needles, okay, so they're going to be needle-shaped. All right, so single, I think single is what we're looking for. Single flat needles, okay. With large upright cones, so single flat needles here. And then large upright cones, which appears to be balsam fir. And it is large upright cones. So here you would put balsam fir. So this is how you will do that section. It's a nice dichotomous key that allows you to go through. And this is what you would actually do. This is the process that you would have to do to figure out what trees are what. So that's what you'll do on the last page. You start with evergreen trees. You answer these questions. Then you go through the tree key. And then these other two pages correspond just to the title page of that website. So before you even get to the forever green section, the why do leaves fall, how do leaves change color. Okay, so that will be it for Sunday night. So do the quick Google form on leaf structure that will be open. Couple questions there, and then complete the worksheet on why do leaves change color. All right, everybody. I know that was a little bit long. It's the end of the day, so I'm droning on a bit. All right. Have a wonderful day and have a nice weekend.